Allow me to say that the launch of the strategy is just the beginning and the work starts right now.
A very good morning to you all. It is a beautiful morning. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Priscilla Sadomba, and I will be your Director of Ceremonies this morning. Before we begin our proceedings, very special mention of our guests of honor this morning, representing the Ministry of Industry and Trade and Commerce, and here on behalf of the Minister is Mrs. Florence Makombe. Very warm welcome to you. We have Mr. Thomas Opera from the delegation of the European Union. He's the head of section of the Economic and Food Security section. Very warm welcome to you. Mr. Zondi Kumwenda, President of ISAS. Very warm welcome to you, sir. Special warm welcome to the National Executive of ISAS here present. All members of the Diplomatic Corps here present, senior government officials here present. Also, very special welcome to our presenters who are here today. We have with us Professor Owen Skay, who is the international consultant at the International Trade Center and director of the Rhodes Business School. Thank you for being with us. Mr. Cornelius Dube, who's a senior research fellow at ZEPARU, the Zimbabwe Economic Policy Analysis and Research Unit. Very warm welcome to you, sir. We also have with us Engineer Lloyd Nyemba, who is a senior engineer at SADC, the Scientific Industrial Research and Development Center. All captains of industry here present, members of the media here present, and distinguished delegates. A very, very warm welcome to you and all protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to you once again. This is the trade and private sector, a result of the Trade and Private Sector Development Program that is funded by the EU. And our main purpose here this morning, which you probably are aware of by now, is to launch the Engineering, Iron and Steel Strategy document. And obviously thereafter, we want to be able to see the ultimate implementation of the Interim Economic Partnership Agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who don't really know enough about ISAS, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the organization. Our theme this morning is embracing value chain linkages as the key to increased capacity and competitiveness. That is our theme this morning. And before we begin the proceedings, I thought I'd give you just a brief background. ISAS was established in 1937 as an employers' organization to protect and advance the interests of employers in the engineering, iron and steel sector. Often it's about the employees, but this is about the employers. The executive members of the association then were instrumental in the formation of the National Employment Council for the Engineering, Iron and Steel Industry, Engineering Medical Fund organization that still exists today. In 1999, it was noticed that there was an increased demand to address business matters, and a consultant was engaged to reorganize the structure of the organization to meet this demand. This initiative led to the formation of the Business Council of ISAS, which was to be chaired by a company executive. And the objectives of the association were also expanded to include business matters as an additional role to that of just industrial relations and collective bargaining matters. So in a snapshot, obviously there's a lot more to that story, but in the interest of time, if you have any more questions or comments that you'd like to make, or please direct them to the Executive Secretary here, Mr. Ntando Chabangu. Where are you? There he is. So any questions that you might have about ISAS, please direct them to him. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite to the podium the president of ASAS, Mr. Zondi Kumwenda. Please help me welcome him to the stage.
Thanks, Priscilla, for such a lively introduction. My task today is very, very simple. And the simplicity of the task is to welcome the invited guests to this very, very important milestone in the history of engineering and iron and steel. I will observe the invitation accepted by the Honorable Minister of Industry and Commerce, Comrade Mike Bima, who is in absentia, but has actually made it possible and sent in a high-powered delegation led by Senior Director Elizabeth Makombe. We are welcome, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We really, really appreciate. In fact, the Ministry of Industry is our parent ministry, and has been our parent ministry for years. So we are the children, they are our fathers and mothers. But thank you so much for coming. I'd like also to observe the presence of the delegation of the European Union, which is here represented by Thomas Opera. Thank you so much for coming. You know, when you look at him, you think he has been in Zimbabwe for so many years, and I was asking him, and he says he has been here since 1 September. But you look more Zimbabwean than wherever you come from. But thank you so much for coming. I would like also to acknowledge the presence of our executives of Engineering Iron Steel Association of Zimbabwe. I will then observe all protocol. Thank you so much for the representatives of the ITC. I'm then on my own. It is indeed a pleasure, and I'm going to read from my prepared speech, if you don't mind. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome all of you to the strategic roadmap launch for the engineering, iron, and steel sector in Zimbabwe. You know, when I joined as president, I did not know that we were going to come to this particular event, and I'm so excited that we are coming to an event that probably will etch something in the history of the sector. This launch comes at a time when our economy is facing challenges of significant proportions. They are monumental, but not insurmountable. You know, yesterday it was around 1 o'clock, and I was waiting for someone to pick me up from the train station in Sandton, to those that have been in Sandton. And the driver was about to take me to a certain place. And then I thought about the speech today, whilst I was standing there and waiting with my bags. I gazed right in front of me, where I was standing outside the Gauteng station, if you know. And there were, I think, at least 4 or 5 huge cranes, and what appeared to be a very, very massive construction area. And then my mind raced so fast, and I imagined what sort of tonnage of steel was going to be used by that contractor. And the name of the contract was Greenacre, and it's a part of the Avenge Group in South Africa. And my heart also sank when I remembered our own steelworks. And then I quickly brushed aside that thought and said, you know, you are in South Africa, you're not in Zimbabwe, forget about it. And the driver came and picked me up and went straight to a plush residential area of Sandton. At around 5 o'clock, I was traveling back from Sandton to O.R. Tambo International Airport. Again, I started wondering in my mind as I was sitting there, and I'm sure that my neighbor who was sitting close to me wondered what this man or black African is thinking about. I admired the smokeless train, moving with ease towards the airport. I began to imagine what sort of tracks. Is it moving on plastic tracks? Is it on steel tracks? Why am I having such confidence in this train? There must be something that is holding it together. And that was, of course, an imagination. And I also imagined what sort of beams are holding together the power lines from which the train was deriving its power to move. Again, it was a bit of imagination. It was a smokeless train. The thought of our steelworks came to my mind again, which is Zisco Steel. This time it was intense and going beyond mere thought and imagination. It touched my heart, and I'm being serious about it. I remembered my brother then, who was a fit and tenor and very skilled in that time, way back in the 80s, who was able to afford a house in a beautiful place called Masasa Park in Kwekwe. And a brand new car. I mean, he was literally able to buy a brand new car, and he was just an artisan. And he was also able to pay school fees for the clan. I was getting engrossed in the memories of Zisco Steel. And then suddenly the train arrived at the airport, and I had to pull out my card so that I can find my way out. Indeed, Zisco Steel breathed a lot of life in the nation, Madam Makombe, and I don't need to remind you of that. But such was the intent of my imagination and the emotional outburst that I had on my own. The whole town of Kwekwe was built around those steelworks. The engineering companies in Bulawayo were all built around Zisco Steel. Mowe Steel, Zeko, Zimplow, Monarch Steel, Nimran Chapman, FE Cells, Rada Metal Industries, Connolly's, just to name but a few. And a whole lot of other business thrived and employed thousands of people in Bulawayo, in Kwekwe, in Harare, and everywhere else, even in the remote areas of Gokwe. The blacksmiths were working on steel. Such was life when that steelworks was working. But some of these companies have closed down, and some of them are on their knees. And yet we've got 30 or so billion tons of iron ore buried underground where we could be sustaining ourselves. Indeed, the demise of Zisco Steel affected a lot of companies that depended on it. And it's well led to serious skills flight. My brother is now in the UK. He's working for British Steel. He was an artisan at Zisco Steel. He's doing okay because he had to look for education for his kids and the future for his kids. I probably won't blame him. I told him that I'll stick it out in Zimbabwe until the sun rises. You know, we've lost to competition in a number of ways. We've lost skills, we've lost everything that we had. As if this is not enough, the development has also seen most of the exporting companies becoming uncompetitive, domestically and regionally due to the influx of cheap imports. The sector has also lost its traditional regional markets in as much as it has lost its domestic market. I was talking to Ian on my way from the airport that I can't believe that steel that is supplied in DRC is coming from South Africa. I just cannot imagine that steel being used in Zambia is coming all the way through Zimbabwe, through the Beitbridge-Chirundu Highway, all the way to Zambia. Steel is a heavy material, and it doesn't need to travel a long distance. The longer it goes, the more expensive it becomes. So we have an opportunity in this country, and all the engineers in this country probably will agree with me. It's very important that we look at that sector seriously. Of course, there are other bigger fish to fry, things that are beyond our control, things that we cannot do, but there are things that we can control ourselves. However, as the engineering and iron steel sector, with the assistance of the European Union, the ITC, as well as the government, we embarked on the study of the special roadmap that is before you. And while recognizing the strategic importance of iron ore extraction and processing, we looked at a few low-hanging fruits that can be tapped until the grand plan is reached. A journey of a mile begins with one step. So this is the beginning. Even if without Zisco Steel, we can do something. It is my fervent hope that this strategic plan would enable us to work with government towards the revival of engineering and iron steel sector. And borrowing from a famous biblical story, I'm a preacher myself, of 4 lepers, I'm sure some people have heard about it, who after noticing that they have been shut out completely from receiving their food supplies from the city of Samaria, because the Syrians had besieged it, had to make critical decisions. They say to themselves, if we stay here, where we are, we will die of hunger. If we try to get into the city, we will also die because there is no food as people are eating each other in that city. They resolved and made a decision to go to the camp of the enemy, the Syrians, where there was food. And they say to each other, if they kill us, we die anyway. But if they spare us, we will live. And indeed, you know the end of the story. They lived because they made a resolve. In the same manner, ISAS, with its partners, the government, the EU, and ITC, made a resolve to do something in the face of formidable forces against them. We embarked on the strategy study, developed a vision for the sector, which shall be presented to you shortly by the team. We would have not achieved this without the participation of a number of stakeholders. It took days, times, flights, and people meeting together to develop this strategy. This Trade and Private Sector Development Program, TPS-DP initiative, has come at a time when industry needs such programs for it to survive and recover. The development of the strategic roadmap started in April 2015, where the objectives of the strategy were developed. The association conducted the first 2 workshops, and these were the pillars of the sector. This is where we identified the pillars of the sector with the working groups which we constituted. It is these working groups that were then assigned specific tasks to execute specific goals and objectives. I shall not go into detail. This is the work of the consultant and the presenters that are coming after me. The research consultants, SEDEC and ZIPARU's findings were also used to inform the strategic roadmap. The results of the field surveys by the 2 consultants will be presented to you later in the program as well. Allow me to say that the launch of the strategy is just the beginning and the work starts right now. This strategy, ladies and gentlemen, and our Master of Ceremony, is there to inform us on what is supposed to be done. And it's there to give us a roadmap, and all we need to do is follow that. We have had well-crafted documents before, but the tendency of a lot of people is that there's no action thereafter. As president of ISAS and with my team, we have made a resolve that we will follow step by step and execute the strategy. But without preempting the presentation from SEDEC and ZIPARU, I would like to say that a recent survey showed that 84% of the raw materials used in the sector, SMEs, etc., are imported. And this has caused serious downturn owing to delays in bringing it and hence affecting productivity, also leading to low capacity utilization. In conclusion, I'm optimistic that this strategic roadmap will receive the necessary support from our parent ministry and the government and all key stakeholders here present. Madam Director, when you are looking for new Zim Steel shareholders, and this is very important to take to the powers to be, remember, ISAS are the customers. They are the suppliers. We would like to be part of the shareholding structure. And we are making that request formally in front of the team that is here. We would like to be part of that. Whether it's 10%, we've got vested interest. We want to be part and parcel of the future Zim Steel. Thank you so much, and may God bless you.
Thank you very, very much to the president of ISAS, Mr. Zondi Kumwenda. I too remember those days, and quite a nostalgic presentation. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, and in the interests of time, I would like to invite to the podium to give his remarks the head of section of the Economic and Food Security section, representing the delegation of the European Union. Please help me to welcome on stage Mr. Thomas Opera.
All protocol observed. Good morning, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words on this very important event. And being a civil engineer by myself, I'm particularly happy to be here this morning and in a room full of engineers. Didn't have this in a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, the strategy launched today is the result of a series of effective efforts and contributions delivered by multiple actors. During the design of the Trade and Private Sector Development Program, which used a participatory approach, the engineering, iron and steel sector was identified as a key area for the revival of the Zimbabwean economy. And having read, when I came here through the strategy, as it is expected, when engineers work on it, you have a very good problem analysis, implementable objective, and a robust connection between these two. And I would like to congratulate you to this very important and very good document. And the EU would like to commend the government of Zimbabwe, in particular the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, together with the EISAT, the Zimbabwe Economic Policy Analysis Research Unit, the Scientific Industrial Research and Development Center, for collaborating with the International Trade Center in the strategy-making process leading to the launch of the strategy today. The EU believes that the ISAT is strategically positioned within the sector to contribute towards enhancing and positively influencing the business environment by promoting the participation of the private sector in the policy-making process, including in the identification of the main issues and the possible solutions for not only in the engineering sector, but also in the Zimbabwean economy. And when you read through the strategy, you see that it touches on the main, the objectives refer to them, the goals refer to the main areas: governance, advocacy, business networks, and capacity development, human and technical. The importance of the engineering and steel sector cannot be overemphasized. In the past, before the economic crisis, Zimbabwe had a vibrant and diversified engineering and metal sector which dominated the SADC region. The sector has the potential to regain its splendor if recapacitated and provided the sector adapts to the changing environment and including embracing new technologies. The strategy outlines actionable steps over the medium term to revitalize the sector. Both policy and market issues are being addressed, and the importance of collaborative links and free and responsible trading opportunities is being emphasized. I want to applaud you and the stakeholders involved in the process for the efforts made and clarity of purpose and objectives. The EU is committed to work with the private sector to bring about the much-needed turnaround of the economy, so to reduce poverty and enhance the standard of living for all Zimbabweans. And many in this room have participated in the needs identification process for a future Euro 7.5 million program in support of the implementation of the Interim Economic Partnership Agreement. This agreement is that I will urge the private sector to take advantage of. And I'm aware that the awareness about this agreement is not always there. And these new programs will put a particular emphasis to promote the opportunities and inform the private sector about this economic partnership agreement between Zimbabwe and the European Union. For example, it allows for duty-free and quota-free access to the European market for Zimbabwean products. And I think that's an opportunity for Zimbabwe that we all should be aware of. Yes, this brings me at the end of my remarks in the interest of time. Thank you very much for your attention, and good luck and all success for and best wishes for the implementation of this strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those kind words, Mr. Thomas Opera. So we are going to switch gears a little bit and ask and invite the Director for Enterprise Development in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Commerce, Mrs. Florence Makombe, to give us her address. Thank you.
The Master of Ceremony, thank you very much. I begin by apologizing on behalf of our Honorable Minister. He would have wanted to be with us this morning, but because of other commitments, he is unable. But however, he has asked me to come and read the speech on his behalf. Just by beginning and saying to all of you, don't give up. Never give up. I think we need to remain focused and committed, and we should never give up. I think God loves us. I will start by saying the President of the Engineering Iron and Steel, Mr. Zondi Kumwenda, I recognize you, say. The Vice President, Mr. Mnyaradzi, I also recognize you. Our delegate from the EU, Mr. T.O. Pereira, I recognize you. Our senior government officials here present, members of the Diplomatic Corps here present, our esteemed members of the Engineering Iron and Steel Association of Zimbabwe, captains of industry, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to be with you this morning to officiate at the launch. It is a very important strategy, the engineering, iron and steel sector strategy. Zimbabwe continues to experience tough economic conditions, but we have demonstrated our resilience and determination to revitalize our economy and build a prosperous country for all our citizens. The engineering, iron and steel sector has been and will continue to be the backbone of industry and commerce. Government acknowledges that there has been adverse conditions that have eroded the competitiveness of this sector, but despite these challenges, the sector continues to play a significant role in job creation, exports, and provision of value-added services, a testimony to the quality of leadership and management of this sector. This strategy is the fruit of participatory and collaborative exercise which a group of dedicated organizations and individuals have committed to finalize it. It outlines actionable steps over the midterm to revitalize the sector. It is clear that there is a high degree of consensus around what needs to be done to address the foundations of competitiveness, particularly with regard to the steel and energy supply, as well as the transportation sector. In this regard, I would like to stress to the international community that Zimbabwe is open for business, and we welcome investors who would like to partner with us in this sector, not only to sell products for local and export, but also to contribute to the rebuilding of our steel sector and transport capacitation. Our engineering and iron and steel sector has the capacity to do this, and the government of Zimbabwe is committed to working with the private sector to achieve this. Africa is on a growth path. What we need, though, is responsible, and what I refer to is an inclusive investment. We cannot enter into one-sided agreements, but rather in partner with investors who have the best interests of Zimbabwe and Africa at heart. We are committed to technology transfer, value local knowledge, and want to reinvest in our society because it makes good business sense to do so. The strategy highlights the importance of addressing market issues as well. We are committed to being a regional player and are seeking collaborative links which promote free and responsible trading opportunities. What I have highlighted so far talks to the macroeconomic issues that the sector is identified as critical for its sustainability. At the level of the business support, the 4 key priorities are to access affordable finance, find ways to increase market share, focusing on ways to develop a cost-effective supply chain, and continue to produce high-quality goods and services that Zimbabwe is renowned for. In short, the cost of borrowing is prohibitive, and hence my appeal to all stakeholders to heed the call of the sector to address this. I also applaud the sector for demonstrating its commitment to unlock value in the domestic economy by reaching out to government and the informal sector to play a pivotal role in refurbishing and developing vital infrastructure requirements, as well as producing products and services for other key sectors, namely agriculture, mining, and construction. There is also an absolute commitment to achieve unity of purpose by ensuring proper governance for the sector and constructively working with the government and other associations and the business support institutions to support areas of priority. As I conclude, I wish to appreciate the fact that the sector has taken the most important initiative of recognizing that we need to continuously invest on our human and technical capacity, develop entrepreneurs, develop linkages with the informal sector so as to mainstream them ever in the increasing economic and social value. I look forward to engaging with you around the creation of the special economic zones, finding innovative ways to implement productivity improvement initiatives. While this strategy is comprehensive and all-encompassing, it needs practical, actionable steps that derive maximum impact in the short term and hence kickstart what will follow. Hence, the importance of the 6 pillars that have been identified, to which I shall specifically refer to: skills and efficiency enhancement to sectors in the SME. This is to be pursued through direct training and the training of trainers in lean manufacturing approach with a focus on production efficiency. Number 2, market studies and competitiveness. This will focus on market demand, which products in which domestic, regional, international markets, the cost of doing business, and the competitiveness benchmarking with the South African sector. The AES's capacity development, empower the sector association on marketing advocacy and lobbying skills in order to enable to be the leading driver of the revival of the sector. The 4th one, which is the cluster development with a focus on the expanding informal sector, which has been confirmed by the sector studies to be a critical actor which the country needs to mainstream with the formal economy to revitalize the competitiveness of the value chain. And then lastly, skills upgrading. This is in partnership with the support that we have with the institutions, universities, to employees from the EAS sector. And then, of course, the opportunity enhancement, specifically exploring ways that the sector can contribute to and benefit from the expansion and diversification of energy supply to the country with a focus of alternative of renewable energy sources such as solar, your wind, and your hydro. Achieving these will most certainly be put on as the road towards fulfilling the sector's vision to be a recognized leader in the sustainable production and supply of value-added iron and steel products in the engineering services. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take this opportunity to thank all the relevant stakeholders that have participated in coming up with this very important strategy. In particular, I want to express my sincere appreciation to the European Union and the International Trade Center for their continued technical and financial support. I would also like to extend my appreciation to our research institutions, including the Zimbabwe Economic Policy Analysis Research Unit, ZEPARU, and the Scientific and Industrial Research Development Center, SIRDC, for the incredible work done in conducting a detailed study on challenges facing the sector and coming up with proposed measures which can help to revive the engineering, iron and steel sector. I would also like to thank all other relevant stakeholders who participated in this exercise of coming up with this strategy. And these include my ministry officials, of course, who continuously work with other relevant stakeholders in drafting this strategy. It is my fervent hope that the private sector, the government, and the development partners will continue to work closely in the implementation of this strategy. I also look forward to the speedy implementation of the strategy through government, through my ministry, and it's more than ready to expedite the implementation of all the relevant measures which are key to the successful growth of this sector. I need to assure you that my ministry, together with other ministries, will work closely and tirelessly to address the issues highlighted in the strategy, which include issues of infrastructure, competitiveness, and marketing. Ladies and gentlemen, government is very much aware that for the engineering, iron and steel sector to be viable and competitive, the issue of reviving our local steel giant, Zisco Steel, is fundamental. The former giant company used to play a critical role in supplying raw materials at competitive prices. That is why government is currently undertaking aggressive measures to revive the steel giant. I thought you'd clap hands on that. With these few remarks, I would like to thank you for showing up at this very important event, that is the official launch of the engineering, iron and steel sector. And I want to say your document, before we have heard it, is officially opened and declared as a strategy. I also want to end my statement from the minister by just saying we should never give up. I want to thank you.
Thank you very much to Senior Director of Enterprise Development in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Commerce, Mrs. Florence Makombe, for those words of encouragement. We are going to ask you to please stand again. We know that you are in a bit of a rush. Before we have our presentation, Professor, we are actually going to cut our ribbon and do the official ceremony while you're setting up. So if I can call up to the front and stand right in front of the banner in front of us, Mrs. Makombe, Mr. Thomas Opera, Mr. Kumwenda, to please join me at the front. So that we can do the right thing. Right, before she cuts, we want those who can ululate to do so. I'm quite a good ululator myself. Those who can do a rousing cheer, please do that. This is the culmination of a lot of hard work, thanks to the International Trade Center, thanks to the EU, thanks to all the research agencies that have been a part of this, thanks to ISAS. This is good stuff, ladies and gentlemen. And we heard from the President, there's a commitment to implement, not just to have a strategy document. And with those thoughts, with that energy, let us give a rousing cheer and cut our ribbon. There it is, ladies and gentlemen, officially launched and ready to be implemented. Thank you so much. Some photo opportunities. Can you get them all in? Applause, applause, ladies and gentlemen. This is great. This is good stuff. Thank you very much. You may take your seats. Thank you so much for coming out. We know that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to be with us, and we are especially honored that you could be with us this morning. Thank you very much. Right, now the moment that we've all been waiting for. I know that the professor has been raring to go for quite some time now. He will be assisted in his presentation by our representatives from ZIPARU and also from SADC, Mr. Lloyd Nyemba. And also, sorry, I've just forgotten, can you help me out with the ZIPARU representative? Cornelius. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please pay attention. I think a lot of information is going to be imparted to us this morning, and we'll get a little bit of an insight into what's actually contained in this document. So without further ado, I'll invite Professor Skay, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, to the podium.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Director of Ceremonies. All protocol observed, and our sincere thanks to the EU, the funding partner, and to the Ministry. Madam Makomba, thank you very much. We really do appreciate it. Now, my task is to give an overview of the strategy, the process, but I also represent International Trade Centre, so often people don't know who is the ITC. And International Trade Centre is the joint agency of UNCTAD and the WTO. It's based in Geneva. It has a local representation in Zimbabwe. And its parents are the United Nations and the World Trade Organization. And the best analogy that I ever heard from a colleague of mine, so I can't claim this is my analogy, but essentially he said it's like this. UNCTAD, if we use a sporting analogy, UNCTAD provides the stadiums and the infrastructure for sport to play. The WTO is the referee. So the WTO determines the rules of how we engage. The ITC is almost like the coach who trains and allows the players to be fit to compete in this environment. So our mandate is essentially to ensure that enterprises are mainstreamed into global value chains. Now I have to say that this has been one of the most exciting engagements that I've ever personally been involved with. And Zimbabwe can be justifiably proud of the capacity that you have. We really had outstanding local partners in the form of ZIPARU and SADC, and I'd really like to acknowledge their contribution. Thank you very much. It seems to me that nothing was too much trouble for them. In the guise of ISAS, the President, Mr. Kumwenda, and his team, who made themselves fully accessible, Zimbabwe is renowned for its hospitality. And again, we cannot in any way say that you did not live up to that. You exceeded that in every way. I also want to acknowledge the people who participated in the process, because it requires long hours. Sometimes it's a thankless task. They're having to juggle jobs and under pressure. And we had senior people from organizations giving up days at a time to come and agreeing to switch off their cell phones and to really engage. And thank you to them, because we all learnt from each other. I was recently introduced to a saying which I really do try to live by every day, and it goes like this: Kumbula uma ukumba umunya muntu kukune iminya imitatu ekukumba wena. And for those who don't know it, it goes by many sayings, and that is, remember, if you're pointing your finger at somebody, there's 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. And that is the issue with strategy. I'm quite sure that there are many of you who are going to read this document. There are going to be things in there that you really like. There's going to be things that you don't like. And my request is, please just remember, before you point a finger, that there might be 3 fingers pointing back at you. So drawing on Madam Makomba and the Minister, who stressed that this is an inclusive process. Hard decisions define us. And Zimbabwe has to make some very, very hard decisions that are going to define what's needed to be going forward. But the only way that it's going to be done is through this collaborative relationship. And I think that the sector is up to doing it. If there's two things alone that the stakeholders are in agreement of, it's the resuscitation of New Zim Steel, the former Zisco Steel, and addressing energy. And I think if we draw on something that happened recently in South Africa, hashtag fees must fall, I think the new mantra for ISAS is hashtag New Zim Steel rise. Hashtag let the energy flow. And as a sector, the sector is saying we can participate. In fact, we're not about being recipients. No, we want to contribute to the rebuilding and resuscitation of New Zim Steel. We want to contribute to the supply of renewable energy sources in Zimbabwe. So I think that message has come through very loud and clear. And I think the stakeholders were very happy to hear what Madam Makamba said today. I also want to share just two anecdotes with you. When I did my master's degree about 20, 30 years ago, I was invited. My thesis was actually on Zimbabwe's trade relationship with the EU and the effect of what was then called Zimbabwe's trade liberalization program. So it was almost a déjà vu for me to be asked to be involved in this process. And I spoke at a high-level conference, not so far in the conference conventions hall, which was absolutely jam-packed. There wasn't an empty seat. And I spoke about the great optimism at the time that was shared around what was going to happen and the contribution that trading with the EU would have. And there was an elderly business person there who, often people tend to be cynical, and I was a young student then in my 20s, and this person was in their 50s. And he said to me, well, look, all that nice stuff you've spoken about, but the problem I still have is that my workers, they don't really work very hard. So in my naivety, I guess, and my academic fervor, I said to him, sir, my most learned professor taught me that there's no such thing as a leader, there's no such thing as a demotivated worker. There's only a leader or manager who can't motivate. I said that 30 years ago in the same hotel. I'm saying it again today. I think it still holds true. Other anecdote, I was doing some research for a very sizable company in South Africa. It's a huge company. It was to do with preferential procurement for broad-based black economic empowerment. And their board is dominated by engineers. And I was invited to make a presentation, and I was very surprised to have the entire board. I was just expecting to deal with a middle manager. So I expressed my surprise, and the CEO said to me, the reason that we're here is that we are engineers, and engineers like things to work. We like to fix things. That's what we do. And that's a message that came through loud and clear with every step of this way, is that we had engineers who are committed to this country, who are committed to fixing things and to making things work. And that's espoused in the vision that we have today. Now, Mr. Muradzi said to me, are you going to go through every page in detail? I said, yes, so I am. That's my job. And his heart sank. And I said, no, I'm only joking. So, very quickly, the mandate was given, put the strategy onto one page. I appreciate that you can't see that, but we managed to succeed because we want to make it a living document. And we know that engineers generally have greasy fingers. The idea is that there's going to be oil and coal dust and everything else on every single page in this document as it becomes a living document for the sector. You are at liberty to quickly turn to certain pages if you want. The value chain, that comes out of page 12 on the document. It's very clear to us that Zimbabwe still is characterized by a very diversified sector. There are many things that happen. And as we know, you are a very resilient sector. You are renowned for your entrepreneurial capability. You are renowned for your ability to make a plan. And hence the intention was to try to make the strategy encompassing all aspects of the value chain. The vision for the sector, we spent a huge amount of time doing this. You can spend 3 years trying to craft a vision and never come up with these elusive 20-odd words. But that's the vision that was decided upon. We spoke about, do we want to be the best? We said we need to acknowledge our constraints. But certainly we have a proud heritage. And that's really what this emphasizes. It's the proud heritage of the sector, its contribution to the economy, and we want to be recognized, and the commitment to being sustainable. Now, we believe that the potential is absolutely enormous. And in fact, in some respects, people believe that this employment figure is understated. People believe, given the right environment and right circumstances, it could grow up to 150,000. And that you can read about on pages 69 to 71 of the document. Currently, the sector revenue is estimated to be about $400 million. Just assuming 100% capacity utilization, that could grow to $1 billion. And if we put the right mechanisms in place, which the strategy is hoping to address, we could generate sector turnover of the region of $3 billion. And that would translate into tax revenue of about $290 million. So there's the old saying, you have to spend money in order to make money. The sector believes that the money spent, the returns will come. Now, I'm just going to hand over to my colleague, Engineer Lloyd Nyemba, because he's just going to provide some insights from the SERDEC study.
Good morning to you all, and all protocols observed. I would like to, first of all, thank the participants to the new survey that we carried out as SERDEC. As you know, one of our mandates is to reduce, to practice sustainable technologies for the benefit of the industry. And we had quite a huge response in the needs assessment survey, which was carried across 84 companies and data collected from 58 of these, whilst the remaining companies contributed through focus group meetings and key informant interviews. This is what we observed as the major obstacles from the firms that participated, that in the environment, corruption was rampant and tax rates were high. Then the practices of competitors in the informal sectors really affected the business. And on the moderate obstacles, there's tax administration, which hindered the lead times and the turnaround times, the labor regulation and health issues, as well as licensing and permits. On the tax rates and tax administration, we also observed that the major problems were with the micro and some small scale players who were actually ignorant of tax issues, and hence the need for training, maybe subsidized training, so that everyone understands and appreciates what it all entails and the benefits that can accrue with compliance to such. On licensing and permits, the general observation was that the system, the statutory and regulatory compliance environment was disjointed, and there was a proposal for a one-stop shop, and also rationalizing these processes so that the cost of compliance is lower, and also the lead time to compliance is shorter. There are also obstacles to the growth of products and markets, and the major obstacle was competition from imported products. That was in two parts. The first competition was against substandard products that are coming from certain areas abroad. And the second one was to do with high quality products, and the products produced locally were of an inferior quality, so that affected the competitiveness. Then the second problem was to do with the local demand that is not growing. Like, for example, the agricultural sector right now is stagnant, and yet most of the demand for engineering components is in the agricultural sector, and the lack of finance to increase capacity. For example, we had some sectors like the foundry, where the market, they acknowledge that the market is there, but the main challenge is the capacity to produce for the market. So there's insufficient production capacity, and at the same time, the cost of finance to recapitalize or to increase capacity, it was quite huge, that it rendered recapitalization not viable. So those were the major obstacles to growth. And I just want to highlight that the capacity utilization, when you look at the surface, we observed, or we deduced that the capacity utilization for the sector was between 38% and 22%. However, most of the firms were utilizing one shift, and this capacity utilization was based on one shift. But when you look at fully maximizing capacity on, say, 2 or 3 day shift, then you realize that the capacity utilization was extremely low, at around 13% for 2014. So these are the challenges that we need to face head on, and the strategic document will actually help as we implement to ensure that we can really compete and tap into the existing market that right now is in the hands of the imported products. The major price or cost driver was the cost of raw materials. Since the ceasing of operations by Zisco Steel, the cost of raw material has really gone up and impacted negatively on the competitiveness of the sector. For example, iron and steel basic products, the cost, when you compare the cost after importation, is actually 100% plus more than the cost of raw materials in the countries we are importing from. So this is really hampering progress and competitiveness. A good example is South Africa, where we are importing much of our raw materials. You import steel from South Africa, and steel being heavy is transported to Zimbabwe. And at the same time, you add value, try to export it back to South Africa, where South Africa is also competing with you. That is a tall order. So the cost of raw material and the resuscitation of New Zim Steel or Zisco is very critical as far as that is concerned. The cost of labor was also a major issue highlighted, and as well as the cost of utilities, where, for example, electrical energy is 43% higher than the regional average. So these are issues that are affecting the competitiveness of the sector. Then we also observed hindrances to new product development, one of the major ones being obsolete technology, lack of funding, lack of technical support, and lack of skills. But the major one was obsolete technology. It was quite subjective, but in reality, it was quite subjective. The main reason being most of the machinery used or the technology used, the firm said our technologies are working very well, they are reliable. So the problem is not about how they are working or how easy they are to use, but the competitiveness in terms of cost of production, in terms of unit cost per unit of production. Now, the challenge there is to convince the firms that when you use modern technology, you can increase your productivity and reduce your unit cost of production. For example, where very few firms are using, say, computer-aided manufacturing, and they're using manual technologies. A good example is, the CNCs that are being used right now. That where maybe you need 3 or 4 artisans, you can have one artisan or machinist handling 3 CNCs. And that will obviously reduce your unit cost of production. Also, looking at the production throughput. You're looking at a CNC doing a month's production using manual technology, and the CNC doing it in a week. So the obsolete technology is really affecting new product development and competitiveness on the market. Financially, everyone is aware of the challenges of the interest rates. 18%, the average was 18% interest rate for the sector, and most of them really are not even tapping into the funding provided by the banks because of the interest rates, and the collateral issues and the complex loan applications were cited as the major hindrances. And most of the funding accessed then was for working capital and nothing for capex, and hence increasing capacity became a major challenge. Then we come to the potential of the subsector. There was really a huge potential for the subsector, considering mining activity that is ongoing. Really, for the grinding media, that is the mill bowls and equipment for small-scale miners, there's great opportunity for the firms in the sector to tap into. The challenge that we observed was also to do with disjointed operations of several companies where they are not linked, say, into clusters which can really confront a certain market together and increase their capacity to supply that market. For example, the foundries, the capacity that the mines require, they are quite huge for the size of an individual foundry, but probably when they come together and as a front kill certain markets in the same manner, say, as what the Group 5 does in the civil engineering, then these markets maybe can be tapped into. The shortage of power and the outages also present an opportunity for the engineering sector, since power is part of the engineering products. So that is also an area that we observed is an opportunity. Solar, we also observed solar is not yet embraced by the industry. Yes, of course, the domestic players and to a less extent, the commercial players, they have embraced solar, but the engineering and the manufacturing industry, solar hasn't been embraced, and other renewable energy options. So these are opportunities for the sector to tap into. We also observed engineering consultancy, project management in the wake of new infrastructural projects that are coming on board, as well as the resuscitation of the industry itself. It requires a lot of activity in project management and consultancy, which currently is being imported. So that was also an opportunity for the sector. And the other opportunity lies in agriculture and the automotive industry. We have loss and loss. Almost everyone is driving now in Zimbabwe, and the automotive industry has to look at ways of tapping into this lucrative sector. We also, I read an article where one of the municipality wanted to import about 500 buses for their needs, for their requirements. And we have the Devon's Engineerings, we have the AVMs and other players in the sector. If these sectors, if these subsectors are strategically clustered, they may tap into these opportunities. Remember that the engineering sector is also project-based. At times it's not production-based, or it's not a fast-moving consumer goods sector. So once projects come and they go and we don't tap into them, we may not survive. So for all these projects that are proposed, be it by government, be it by industry, then we must there to tap into it. And the strategic document also explains that to ensure that the linkages are there. You see from the theme that we are talking of embracing value chain linkages to increase capacity and competitiveness. These value chain linkages are really essential for our sector. The poultry sector has done it. It has worked for them. And I know many other sectors who have really embraced value chain linkages to enhance local competitiveness. So I am convinced that if we take the same approach as a sector, we can rise together. Thank you.
Mr. Cornelius Dube from Zaparu, provide an overview of their input.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My task here is probably the simplest of them all. I have to walk you through this slide as well as the next slide. What I was talking about here, basically, these are mostly the main challenges. Of course, we know that the sector has so many other challenges, but among those challenges, there are those that we can consider to be low-hanging fruits, where it does not take much for them to be exercised upon. The first example, we're talking about exchange control. I think one of the issues that is quite clear to all of us is that our exporters are having a lot of challenges, especially as far as gaining competitiveness in the export market is concerned. So some of them try to engage in some innovative ways. For example, they can offer very flexible payment terms to their customers in the export market. But now, under the current exchange control regulations, if you do not repatriate your earnings, your export earnings within 90 days, actually you begin to be penalized. So the challenge here is how best can the exchange control regulations be structured in such a way that they also give some flexibility on the part of exporters so that they can try to be innovative and try to gain some of the competitiveness that they've already lost. The issue to do with indigenization, the point that we are only trying to make to put across here is that the players in this sector, they're also failing to explain this policy, their potential partners, actually their potential investors. So now the issue is to do with clarity of the policy. To what extent can we say everyone can easily converse with potential stakeholders, potential investors to say, come and invest in this sector. Then the issue of conflicting policies. I think we can give so many examples on as far as this issue is concerned. But for the purpose of this sector, we can give an example of Zisco Steel, this Zisco Steel that we are talking about. We all know that there were more or less like some conflicting positions coming from the Ministry of Industry on the one hand, very optimistic that this new company is going to take off, and then the Ministry of Mines and Mining Development on the other hand, also being concerned about some iron ore deposit in Bua mine or thereabout. And then at the end of the day, we don't seem to see any takeoff as far as this project is concerned. On the issue of chrome and platinum export bans, I think this was mostly more or less like a reactionary measure to say the point was to try to say let's have beneficiation and value addition of these products rather than them being exported in raw form. But now, just because of the capacity challenges in the local market, these two, which could have been positive, especially as far as enhancing growth of this sector is concerned, is now lost simply because these export bans have been removed. So now the industry now lacks this issue. I mean, these two in which they can also act positively towards value addition and beneficiation, which is actually one of the core activities of this sector. The rules of origin, I think the president mentioned in his speech that almost about 84% or there, but I think the figure that he mentioned was 84% of the material that are being used, they are imported. But now we are also a member of COMESA, we are a member of SADC. This sector also tried to enjoy some of the free market access. But now, just because most of the composition of the material that is embedded in their manufactured product, they're actually imported. So they are failing to qualify under the rules of origin. So those are some of the challenges that they are also facing compared to their peers in the region. The issue to do with regulation in the EMA. Okay, the issue to do with regulation in the EMA, the concern basically is that the template that EMA uses is almost difficult, or rather, it's almost impossible to pass that template because they classify you as green, blue, in another, I think it's orange or so. Now, but now there's a general feeling among the players in the industry that this template is not properly contextualized to the realities that they are obtaining in Zimbabwe. I remember about 2 years ago when we were doing a different study, we discovered that EMA was saying, according to their template, if you are using coal from Hwange Colliery, automatically you can't be blue because that coal, in terms of carbon emissions, etc., it does not pass the standard. So the template that EMA is using is more or less like you are always assured that you are going to be penalized by EMA. So those are some of the challenges that they were mentioning about. Labor laws, I think those are quite straightforward. We all know that there was a lot of challenges as far as trying to make sure that at least you rationalize your labor law is concerned, given the issue to do with minimum wages as well as other, the Labor Act that was more seen as protective to employees rather than the employers. Import duties. We all know that as a way of trying to protect the local industry, the Ministry of Finance as well as through the Ministry of Industry, they've gone a long way to try to make sure that they impose tariffs on so many products. But now, along the way, some of the products for which the local companies do not have the capacity to produce, they've also been subjected to some import duties. And now some raw materials which the company actually tried to use, now they are now, we still need to import them because there is no local alternative now. So now this more or less like becomes counterproductive in that whilst you were trying to help local industry, you're actually punishing them through some of these products, especially those that are used as raw materials. Education policy, this was simply emphasizing the point that there is more or less like a mismatch between the type of graduates or the type of people that are churned out from our universities and what the industry requires. So the industry actually is to engage in additional cost, training cost, etc., which also actually before the people are ready to become productive. So the orientation of our general curriculum is something that can also be amended to make sure that it exactly suits what the players in the industry require. Now this slide has a lot of text, but the issues you can refer to your documents on page 42 to page 43. They're just straightforward. Those are issues that that do not require much explanation. But I'll just pick on some few of them. I think I'll pick on three main points. The issue to do with Cisco Steel, that one is, I think, is quite obvious. It has already been said, and we all know that it's going to be a priority. But one thing that I think we also know, this is related to what I have said in the previous slide, we were talking about the issue to do with the beneficiation. We now try to see the government, at times they impose a ban on exports and then they lift it up. They are more or less trying to experiment, but now it's because we are being reactive as a country. Probably now or in the future, if we can now make beneficiation milestones be inbuilt into the concession to say now, before you mine, we expect you, before we issue a license, a mining license, we export you to the next 5 years to have started, in 5 years, whatever period that can be agreed between government and the investor. That way, at least everything will be above board rather than reactionary policies where we just say, can you please beneficiate? We ban raw export, we ban raw platinum, and then a few months down the line, we reverse again the deal. Also related to that is the issue of export tariffs, where we can say, of course, rather than a ban, to say we are banning this export, we are banning, when the local player do not have the necessary capacity to fully absorb all that material, probably we can start by instituting some exports, very small export tariffs, especially for mineral export, so that you actually encourage beneficiation. The indigenization law is also another issue that I can talk about from here. Mostly the sector position, as far as the indigenization law is seen as almost across all sectors, is something that is negative. But it is also a law that can be leveraged upon, especially if you want to increase production. For example, trying to leverage on the issue of local preferences, say local purchase preferences, supply preferences, to say just because we are indigenous companies in this sector, can we also get a little bit preference compared to the companies that we are competing against? I think the rest of the issues from there, they're quite straightforward, which we can also refer to in the slide. But I just wanted to pick on these from that slide there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Dube. So just moving on, we started this process about 6 or 7 months ago. It was an initial brainstorming gathering where all the sector players came together. We split into 2 work groups where the issues and challenges and opportunities were articulated, and flowing out of that, these 4 goals were developed. Now you can have a look at those goals on page 17 to 18 of the document. So there's a short summarized matrix there. You can look down the left-hand side, and the goals are stated very simply there. So really the first goal was around developing a governance model that's robust, it gets unity of purpose, so that all the sector players are aligned, because that's only through that inclusive process that you're going to meet the challenges. And I think that everybody's under no illusion that there are huge challenges, and there are many things that are beyond your control right now. You can't, the sector can't address New Zim Steel by itself. You can't address the energy issues by themselves. So we need to ensure that we have unity of purpose, that the sector and the players are acting in the best interest of the sector and the country. So the three objectives around that were getting better collaboration, having a constructive collective bargaining environment, and obviously a strong sector association. Secondly was around developing this voice and visibility, about having advocacy and lobbying, so that you can go to government, go to other sector players, and be constructive in the way that you engage, so that government says, yes, we think this is reasonable, we understand what it is that we're trying to do, and then to align the policies so that there is coordination and coherence. And ultimately, the sector's not making decisions by itself, for itself, nor the respective ministries, and so on. There's a clear commitment to revive the sector, and you will see there's a whole number of initiatives from special economic zones, New Zim Steel we've spoken about. And then the publicity and awareness is the third objective, because you need to get members, and if you're in a declining sector, your membership declines, you get less resources. These challenges need to be addressed. Then the third goal was around developing a strong network of business support services. And since the economy is dollarized, you've had stability, but now you're dealing with the next challenge. And that is essentially Zimbabwe has no say over its monetary policy anymore. And I read an article the other day that some prominent economist was saying that countries in Africa should start moving to devalue their currencies now. Zimbabwe doesn't have that. Can I call it a luxury? I don't know if that's the right word. But you don't have that. So the only way that you can remain price competitive is to lower your costs. And how are you going to do that? That means you're going to have to become more productive. So I don't have an easy answer to that. But I can assure you that you have economists in Zimbabwe, we've met them, we spoke to them, that feel that there are solutions that can be reached. And the time for government and industry to really come together without any preconceived ideas to address these sorts of issues, that's what we're focusing on there. So, but having said that, it's the delivery. You need to have access to cheap long-term finance, international lines of credit, however that be done. The banking sector needs to be more accessible across all the sectors. And then lastly, around the human and technical capacity. And there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done here. You have incredible talent. We are hugely under-resourced. And where the money is going to come from, as we saw in South Africa is saying we don't have the money to do that. Where Zimbabwe is going to get the money from? Well, you need to remove all the soft constraints that have been identified. And part of that is coming together constructively to do the sorts of things that I've spoken about here. Okay, so just very quickly, as I said, under unity of purpose, there are those three objectives. Similarly, for voice and visibility, for accessing finance, which was very much at the top of the list, a supply chain that's cost effective, high quality goods and services, and then around getting the human and technical capacity, focusing on entrepreneurship, and a critical aspect there is ensuring that the informal sector, who by themselves are becoming formidable competitors to the formal sector. And a lot of people have opted out of the formal sector, have gone to the informal sector, and the formal sector can't compete. I presume many of those enterprises aren't paying their taxes, which further erodes the fiscal base of the country, and it becomes a downward spiral. So again, one has to think creatively around how we collectively address that to encourage those informal players to come back into the mainstream economy again. So just a quick summary, a mind map, if you like, of all the strategy components. I'm not going to go through that in great detail. Suffice to say, please turn to page, if you look on page 88 of the document, you will see there that The goals, objectives, measures, actions are identified, an estimate of resources, and really to say that whenever one is involved in an exercise such as this, there's a lot of pie-in-the-sky stuff in this document. We acknowledge that. There might be things that people are saying that that's ridiculous, that's impossible, it's never going to happen. But if you don't think that, well, then you don't dream it, you don't turn it into reality. On the other hand, we try to bring in on-the-ground practical suggestions, things that are going to have immediate impact. We also acknowledge that the needs are greater than the resource capacity. It's acknowledged. So discussions need to be had now around prioritization. So that prioritization needs to happen in the governance discussion. And then once those priorities are identified, then the advocacy needs to start advocating so that those priorities can be addressed. And then from the governance perspective, you will need to monitor and evaluate the performance of the strategy going forward. So, we believe that these 6 pillars are practical and implementable. Some cost estimates have been done around that. And we talk about skills and efficiency enhancement, market studies, ASAS capacity, cluster development, skill upgrading, opportunity enhancement. And flowing out of that, we would hope that very soon these sorts of practical direct interventions will happen so that there will be ASAS with a group of manufacturers and suppliers looking at cluster development with a view to special economic zones, putting in a lean startup and lean manufacturing approach so that that can be scaled up and replicated. Then targeting SMEs, a mixture of those probably in the informal and the formal sector to see how we can begin to start addressing the mainstreaming issues and giving practical issues and training on the kind of activities that we put there. And then lastly, building capacity for your sector association so that it can represent you, as we say, to the powers that be, so that your competitive base can be strengthened again. And one hopes that in parallel, the kinds of macro challenges that you are confronted with, like reliable electricity and power supply, like access to a reliable raw material supplier, etc., will carry on so that optimism is re-injected into the sector and that you have a target that you can move towards.
Guys, this is the time when we should engage government for the review of tariffs, because by the time we meet in February 2016, the budget would have been announced, and this is the time when they are doing budget formulation. So I urge all the guys with information and submissions that you would like to communicate to Minister of Industry and the Minister of Finance that, guys, this is the time to do it. If we don't do it by the 20th, 25th of November, we may miss the boat, and next year we will be crying again with all these things that you're talking about. I think I'm very motivated by the projects that have been mentioned, the Unki, the Zimplats, the Zimas, the one in Shavane, all these projects. Let us now go to the Minister of Industry to engage the Minister of Finance that any import that comes in, the duties must be increased. So I think the engagement is now, the ministry officials can confirm to that. So all I'm saying, guys, let's engage. To answer what Ian said earlier on, we are addressing the how part. Sometimes probably we take the biggest chunk of the blame. But I think let's get stuck in there. Coming to the closing remarks, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Ministry of Industry officials who are here present, being led by the director who has left. Our partners, supporting partners, EU and ITC, SIRDC and ZEPARO, Ministry of Industry and Commerce, ASAS members who participated in the formulation of this strategy, and the ASAS Secretariat, all ASAS members who are here and non-members, the members of the academic fraternity represented by Engineer Chamisa Masiwa from the UZ, members of the SMEs Association, members of the youth groups that are here represented, and everybody else who has just come to be part of this process. I also acknowledge you. I acknowledge also the media consultants for a splendid job that they are doing by providing these facilities for us to be able to communicate. By acknowledging this, I'm also thanking you for availing yourselves and your expertise in doing all these things. But I think what is left for us is not only to keep these documents in our respective drawers in our offices. This is a roadmap, as we say it is. It gives us guidance in terms of what we should do. The success or failure of our businesses depends on the action that we take immediately after I finished speaking, because you then make a decision whether you're going to put it in the drawer or say this was a talk show. We are renowned for that. I would also like to thank very much the Director of Ceremonies for leading us in this process that we have done. And most importantly, thank our President for the leadership that he continues to provide within this ASAS group. So ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for coming. I thank you all for the support, and I wish you all the success. Let us go out there and conquer. Don't forget, never give up and remain focused. Thank you.
It was really exciting to have this successful launch where we have managed to bring together the industry, the government, research and academia, all in one room to witness this important event that will take our sector to another level.
I'm very glad that I was invited to this platform of iron and steel. As the SMEs, on behalf of the SMEs, we are urging all the young people of Zimbabwe to come together and work together for the betterment of Zimbabwe.
My name's Ian Connolly. I'm the chairman of the ISAS Business Committee. I think this has been a very good event today. It has initiated something of a momentum that we hope to keep into the future for ISAS as it seeks to have an impact not only in the engineering sector but throughout the manufacturing environment in Zimbabwe. It's a crucial part of our economy.
It is a history-making event for the organization and one of its kind. It has been a successful launch of this document, which we hope that we all as key stakeholders were going to participate to see it to fruition. The purpose of the Engineering Iron and Steel Association of Zimbabwe is to service the membership and to protect the interests of members in the engineering sector. It is an organization with a history, having been established in 1937. And as we host this launch of this event, ISAS has turned 78 years, which is quite a long period. But this history-making event is telling a story. Having developed from an employers association only dealing with issues of industrial relations and collective bargaining, the Engineering Iron and Steel Association has transformed itself into looking into the core issues that affect business. The day-to-day operations of business have become a major challenge due to a variety of challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. And it is from this background that we are calling upon all non-members to please make an effort to join the sector and enjoy the benefits. The association belongs to the members, and the association survives on the membership. It does not cost much. It's a minimum cost of a subscription per month, and it shouldn't really be a strain to an organization because the benefits are massive.
As president, I am so excited and I am so hopeful. And also I know it will happen. The action points that we have put together, the determinations that we have put together in this launch, I hope and believe that they will come to fruition.